There is no greater tragedy than to serve a world that no longer knows how to honor service. We speak now of the loyal man, not the obedient servant, not the blind follower, but the one who binds his soul to something greater than himself. A man whose word is his law, whose presence is a promise, and whose silence speaks volumes more than most men's speeches. This is the man who stands firm when all others sway, the man who does not chase trends or seek validation from crowds. He is not concerned with popularity, only fidelity to truth, to duty, to those he has sworn to protect. But we live in an age where loyalty is seen as weakness, where commitment is mistaken for naivety, where the man who stays when others leave is often ridiculed rather than revered. In this disposable culture, everything is temporary: relationships, careers, beliefs, even identities. And yet there are still those who refuse to discard what matters. Men who carry the weight of their word like iron on their backs. They do not break because they have chosen not to. So who was the first of them? Who walked this path before us, bearing the burden of faithfulness in a world already forgetting its meaning? Let me tell you about Socrates. Yes, Socrates, the philosopher condemned by his own city, sentenced to death for questioning too much, for speaking too plainly, for refusing to compromise his principles. He did not flee when offered the chance. He drank the hemlock willingly, not out of submission, but out of loyalty to Athens, to truth, to the idea that a man must stand for something even if it costs him everything. He was called many things: a madman, a corrupter of youth, a dangerous thinker, but never a coward, never a man without conviction. He lived in a time when the gods were fading, when democracy was unraveling into mob rule, when power shifted like sand beneath the feet of those who tried to hold it. Yet through it all he remained steadfast, not because he believed Athens was perfect, but because he believed it was worth struggling for, worth dying for. And isn't that the essence of loyalty? To love not what is flawless, but what is meaningful. Loyalty is not blind obedience. It is not servitude. It is the choice to remain faithful to something, even when it becomes inconvenient, even when it ceases to reward you, even when the world tells you to let go. It is the quiet defiance of a man who refuses to betray what he believes in, even when betrayal would be easier. The modern man, however, has been taught to abandon traditions, abandon commitments, abandon certainty. He is told that freedom lies in detachment, that happiness comes from perpetual motion, that identity is fluid, and loyalty is a cage. But what happens when a man builds his life around movement, only to find himself standing nowhere at all? We have become a people of drifters, of men who change their minds more often than their clothes, who fall in love quickly, leave faster, and wonder why they feel so empty. We speak of independence, but practice isolation. We claim autonomy, yet bow to algorithms and social approval. We say we want freedom, but we run from responsibility like it is poison. And the loyal man, he watches all of this unfold, and he wonders if he is the fool. He asks himself, is loyalty still virtue when the world no longer values it? Is integrity still strength when no one else seems to care? Does sacrifice still mean anything when nothing lasts long enough to be sacrificed for? This is the tragedy, the erosion of a way of being that once defined the noblest among us. In ancient times, loyalty was not just admired, it was sacred. The samurai had bushido, the knights had chivalry, the stoics had duty. Even the warriors of Sparta were raised to die for their city, not for themselves. These were not primitive ideas. They were the scaffolding upon which civilization stood. They gave men purpose, direction, meaning. But today we are told that meaning is whatever we choose it to be. That purpose is subjective, that tradition is outdated, that the past is irrelevant. And so the loyal man walks alone. He is not bitter, he is not angry. He simply does not know where he belongs anymore. He tries to adapt. He listens to the gurus who preach self-love over self-discipline. He follows the influencers who sell happiness through consumption. He reads the books that tell him to find himself, as if identity is something lost and waiting to be found in a weekend retreat or a new label. But none of it fits, because the loyal man does not seek comfort. He seeks clarity. He does not crave distraction. He craves direction. He does not desire escape. He desires purpose, and he finds none. So he returns to silence, to solitude, to the slow, grinding work of holding on to something real, even when the world insists that reality itself is malleable. Let me tell you another story about a man named Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, philosopher king, soldier, father, one of the last great figures of the ancient world, and perhaps the most enduring example of what it means to lead with loyalty, not to empire, not to power, but to principle. His Meditations is not a book of grand theories or sweeping declarations. It is a whisper across centuries, a private journal written in the midst of war, governance, and personal loss. It is a record of a man trying to stay true to himself in a world that constantly pulls him away. He writes, "Do external things distract you? Then make time for yourself to learn something worthwhile. Stop letting yourself be pulled in all directions." That is the battle of the loyal man. The constant pull between what is easy and what is right, between what pleases and what endures, between the noise of the world and the quiet voice within. Marcus did not seek glory. He did not build monuments to himself. He did not write to impress. He wrote to remind himself who he was, why he served, and what mattered beyond the fleeting chaos of the present. That is the heart of loyalty, remembering who you are, even when the world forgets. Today we are bombarded with messages telling us to reinvent ourselves, to pivot, to hustle, to optimize. We are told that consistency is boring, that stability is stagnation, that the only thing that matters is growth, no matter the cost. But what is growth without grounding? What is progress without purpose? What is ambition without integrity? These are questions the loyal man cannot ignore, because he has seen the consequences of their absence. He has watched friendships dissolve under the weight of convenience. He has witnessed marriages collapse under the illusion of endless choice. He has observed institutions crumble under the pressure of short-term thinking. He has felt the sting of betrayal, not from enemies, but from those who claimed to stand beside him until the moment it became inconvenient. And still he does not turn back. Still he chooses to serve. Still he chooses to stay. Still he chooses to believe that some things are worth holding on to, even if they no longer seem to be returning the favor. But here is the deeper wound. Not rejection, not failure, not even loneliness. It is the doubt, the creeping suspicion that maybe the world is right, maybe loyalty is foolish, maybe commitment is outdated, maybe the old ways were wrong, maybe he has wasted his life believing in something that no longer exists. That is the existential crisis of the loyal man in a disposable culture. He is not afraid of hardship. He welcomes it. He is not afraid of pain. He has endured it. What terrifies him is the possibility that his sacrifices were meaningless, that his discipline was unnecessary, that his restraint was a mistake. And this is where women enter the narrative, not as critics, not as adversaries, but as mirrors, because a woman in the symbolic sense reveals the state of a man's soul. She is not merely a partner, nor merely a temptation. She is the embodiment of what a man truly believes in. She reflects whether he serves something higher, or whether he is chasing illusions. A loyal man draws strength from a woman who honors depth, who sees value in stillness, who appreciates substance over spectacle. But in a culture that prizes novelty over nuance, that rewards superficiality over sincerity, that elevates drama over dignity, that same woman may not exist. Or worse, she may be drowned out by the noise. And so the loyal man finds himself caught between two forces, the internal demand to remain true to himself, and the external reality that makes such truth increasingly difficult to sustain. He is not angry at women. He is not resentful toward the changing world. He simply feels displaced, like a knight in a land that no longer remembers chivalry, like a monk in a temple turned into a shopping mall, like a soldier fighting a war that no one else believes is happening. But he fights anyway, because that is who he is, because that is what loyalty demands, because to surrender is to deny the very core of his being. And so he walks forward, not because the path is clear, but because turning back would mean losing himself entirely. He carries the weight of his choices, his oaths, his promises. He does not expect praise. He does not seek recognition. He simply seeks to remain faithful to something, to someone, to himself, even if the world forgets, even if history erases him, even if no one ever thanks him, because the loyal man does not serve for applause. He serves because he must, because to do otherwise would be to betray everything he is, and in a world that forgets how to honor loyalty, he remains its last living testament.
There is a quiet war being waged, not with swords or bullets, but with values. It is the war between permanence and impermanence, between duty and convenience, between the man who stands by his word and the world that no longer understands why he would. The loyal man does not seek war. He seeks order, structure, meaning. He builds his life on principles, not trends. He swears oaths not because they are easy, but because they are difficult, and because in swearing them, he defines himself beyond fleeting desires or shifting social winds. But what happens to a man when the very concept of honor becomes archaic, when loyalty is dismissed as naivety, when commitment is seen as a cage rather than a covenant? Let me tell you about a man who knew this battle intimately, Marcus Tullius Cicero, a Roman statesman, philosopher, and orator. Cicero lived at the end of an era, the twilight of the Roman Republic, when institutions crumbled under the weight of corruption, ambition, and decay. He was a man of law, of rhetoric, of principle, and above all, he was a man of loyalty, not to power, but to the idea of Rome itself. He did not seek glory. He sought justice. He did not chase empire. He defended republicanism. He stood for something greater than himself, even when doing so made him enemies, even when it cost him everything. Cicero believed in the sanctity of the oath, in duty officius to poitruopa cum den card, of the tord of five cum the tord officius fard, as men shulor the tincture. This is the essence of the loyal man, to remain faithful to his station, even when the world around him collapses, not out of stubbornness but out of conviction, not out of fear of change, but out of reverence for truth. But Cicero also understood the price of loyalty. In a time when honor had lost its value, he was exiled, betrayed, and ultimately assassinated by those who saw his integrity as a threat to their ambitions. His head and hands were displayed publicly, a grotesque warning against standing firm in a world that had forgotten how to honor such men. And yet history remembers him, not because he won battles, not because he ruled an empire, but because he held fast to his principles when others abandoned theirs. What does it mean to be a loyal man in an age where the very notion of principle has been eroded?
We live in a world where commitments are treated like disposable commodities, where relationships dissolve faster than they begin, where institutions once built on trust now operate on transactional logic, where loyalty is often met with betrayal and integrity is mistaken for weakness. In such a world, the loyal man is an anomaly. He does not drift from job to job chasing higher paychecks. He does not discard friendships when they become inconvenient. He does not abandon his family when hardship strikes. He does not betray his beliefs to fit into the latest ideological fashion, because he understands that true strength lies not in mobility, but in steadfastness. Yet the modern landscape offers little support for such resolve. We are told that adaptability is the key to success, that reinvention is the new loyalty, that survival depends on our ability to pivot, shift, and detach when necessary. But what happens to a man when he detaches from everything? What remains of him when there is nothing left he refuses to let go of? This is the existential dilemma of the loyal man. He must constantly ask himself whether his fidelity is still a virtue, or if it has become a liability in a world that no longer rewards it. And here women again appear, not as antagonists but as symbols, as reflections of his inner state, because the way a man relates to women reveals the depth of his discipline, the clarity of his purpose, and the resilience of his convictions. For the loyal man, a woman is not merely a romantic interest. She is the embodiment of the values he holds sacred. She is the test of his self-mastery. She is both the temptation to stray and the mirror that reveals whether he has remained true to himself. When a culture elevates superficiality over substance, when it prizes novelty over depth, when it confuses passion with commitment, then the loyal man finds himself at odds with the very forces that shape human connection. He is not immune to desire. He is not untouched by longing. But he chooses restraint over indulgence. He chooses devotion over distraction. He chooses silence over empty promises. And in doing so, he separates himself from the herd, because most men today do not choose loyalty. They follow impulse. They chase validation. They seek comfort disguised as freedom. They mistake independence for isolation and autonomy for detachment. But the loyal man knows better. He knows that true freedom is not found in endless options, but in the courage to say no to distractions, to temptations, to the seductive illusion that meaning can be found in perpetual motion. He knows that real strength is not in never falling, but in rising every time he is knocked down. He knows that identity is not something to be constructed anew each day, but something to be discovered through consistent action, through daily choices that affirm who he is and what he believes in. And yet the world tells him otherwise. It tells him that he should prioritize himself above all else, that relationships are expendable, that institutions are corrupt, that truth is subjective, that history is irrelevant, and slowly, insidiously, doubt creeps in. Did I waste my time staying faithful? Was my sacrifice truly noble, or just foolish? Is there any meaning in holding on to something when the world has already let go? These questions gnaw at the soul of the loyal man, not because he fears death or loss, but because he fears insignificance. He does not need applause. He does not crave recognition. What he needs is confirmation that his choices mattered, that his sacrifices were not in vain, that his life was not just a footnote in a story no one reads anymore. This is the tragedy of the loyal man in a disposable culture. He is not defeated by external forces alone. He is worn down by the erosion of meaning itself. He watches as traditions vanish, as institutions decay, as language loses its precision, as truth becomes malleable, as the past is rewritten to serve present agendas. And he wonders, was anything ever real? But then in the quiet moments he remembers. He remembers the feeling of waking up before dawn to train his body, not for vanity, but for discipline. He remembers the nights spent reading philosophy, not for status, but for understanding. He remembers the long silences endured not out of loneliness, but out of choice. He remembers the promises made, not for show, but because they were binding. And in those memories, he finds proof that he was not wrong, that his path was not misguided, that his loyalty was not misplaced. Because the loyal man does not exist to be popular, he exists to be whole, to live in alignment with something greater than himself, to embody a standard that transcends time. And in a world that forgets how to honor such men, he becomes the last guardian of an ancient truth, that a man is not defined by what he acquires, but by what he refuses to let go of, even when the world demands otherwise, even when no one is watching, even when history tries to erase him. Because the loyal man does not serve for reward, he serves because he must, because to do otherwise would be to betray the very core of his being, and in the end, that is what makes him unbreakable, not because he never falters, but because he always returns to his word, to his mission, to himself. Loyalty is not born in comfort. It is forged in fire, in silence, in solitude. A man does not become loyal because it is easy. He becomes loyal because he has no other choice, because his soul demands structure, his spirit craves meaning, and his body knows the weight of discipline. The loyal man does not wait for permission to stand firm. He does not seek validation to remain faithful. He simply does what must be done, even when no one is watching, even when no one remembers. Because loyalty is not a performance, it is a way of being. And like all true ways of being, it is tested, ruthlessly, relentlessly, without mercy. Let me tell you about a man who knew this truth better than most, Epictetus. Born a slave in Hierapolis, Epictetus was never promised freedom, let alone influence. But unlike so many who are shaped by oppression, he did not break beneath it. He did not curse his fate. He did not surrender to bitterness. Instead, he studied, he listened, he absorbed the teachings of Stoicism from his master, Musonius Rufus, and when he was finally freed, he did not squander that freedom on indulgence or revenge. He taught, he wrote, he lived, not as a philosopher of luxury, but as a philosopher of hardship. His discourses and Enchiridion were not abstract musings for the elite. They were instructions for survival, for men who had nothing but their willpower to hold on to. He believed that suffering was not an obstacle to virtue, but its crucible. No great thing is created suddenly, he said. Those who are over-anxious for quick results in anything will never see the real progress. This is the lesson of the loyal man. That strength is not found in immediate victories, but in enduring defeats. That character is not built in moments of triumph, but in moments of sacrifice. That integrity is not proven in times of ease, but in times of pressure. But how does a man maintain loyalty in a world that no longer believes in it? How does he hold fast to principles when everything around him shifts like sand? We live in an age of disposability, of fleeting commitments, of relationships reduced to swipes and exits, of institutions hollowed out by corruption, of values rewritten to suit trends, of identities fractured by endless self-reinvention. And yet the loyal man refuses to drift. He refuses to discard. He refuses to betray, even when betrayal would bring relief, even when abandonment would bring comfort, even when escape would bring peace, because he understands that peace is not found in detachment, but in devotion. He does not serve because he expects reward. He serves because service defines him. He does not stay because he fears change. He stays because he chooses fidelity over convenience. He does not commit because he lacks options. He commits because commitment is the only path to depth, and in doing so he separates himself from the rest. Because most men today do not choose loyalty, they choose distraction, they choose noise, they choose the illusion of freedom while living lives dictated by algorithms, social approval, and instant gratification. But the loyal man knows better. He has trained his mind to resist impulse. He has conditioned his body to endure hardship. He has disciplined his heart to love without possession. And he has learned through trial, through pain, through loss, that the only thing worth possessing is the self. To be loyal is to be sovereign over one's own soul. To be disloyal is to be ruled by every passing desire. This is why the loyal man stands apart, not because he is superior, but because he is rare, and rarity invites scrutiny. He is called rigid in a world that prizes fluidity. He is called outdated in a world that worships novelty. He is called foolish in a world that mistakes short-term gain for wisdom. But none of these labels shake him, because he knows that true strength is not in adapting to every wind, but in standing firm when the storm rages. And here again, women appear, not as adversaries, not as temptations, but as reflections. Because a woman reveals the state of a man's soul, she is not merely a romantic interest, she is the embodiment of what he truly believes in. She is the mirror that shows whether he serves something higher, or whether he is chasing illusions. For the loyal man, a woman is not someone to possess, she is someone to honor, not someone to control, but someone to protect, not someone to use, but someone to respect. And in a culture that reduces human connection to transaction, that mistakes passion for purpose, that elevates drama over dignity, he finds himself increasingly at odds with the very forces that shape modern relationships. He does not fear intimacy, he fears superficiality. He does not reject love, he rejects manipulation. He does not avoid women, he avoids those who demand conformity to false ideals. Because he knows that loyalty is not just about staying, it is about discernment, about knowing what and who is worth remaining faithful to. And this is where most men fail. They confuse loyalty with blind allegiance. They mistake commitment for captivity. They equate devotion with weakness. But the loyal man sees the truth. Loyalty is not submission, it is sovereignty. It is the act of choosing something and refusing to let go, even when the world tells you to. Even when others abandon their posts. Even when the cause seems lost. Even when history forgets your name. Because the loyal man does not serve for recognition. He serves because he must. Because to do otherwise would be to betray the very core of his being. And in the end, that is what makes him unbreakable. Not because he never falters, but because he always returns to his word, to his mission, to himself. A man does not become loyal by accident. He becomes loyal through fire, through silence, through solitude. Loyalty is not a trait, it is a crucible. A forge where weakness is burned away, and only the core of a man remains. It is not chosen for comfort, it is chosen because it defines him beyond trends, beyond convenience, beyond the seductive illusion that meaning can be found in endless movement. But what happens to a man when the world no longer understands loyalty? When commitment is seen as weakness, when tradition is dismissed as oppression, when faithfulness is mistaken for naivety? The loyal man does not rage against this world. He does not seek to convert or condemn. He simply stands where others have fallen. He endures where others have abandoned. He remains when all others have left, and in doing so he becomes something more than a man. He becomes a symbol of discipline, of duty, of self-mastery, Let me tell you about a man who understood this truth better than most, Lucius Junius Brutus, founder of the Roman Republic, architect of its first government, a man who stood at the edge of tyranny and refused to look away. Brutus did not kill a king for power, he killed him for principle, not out of vengeance but out of conviction. He saw the rot of monarchy, the corruption of absolute rule, and he acted not for himself but for Rome. He did not take the throne, he did not declare himself emperor. Instead, he established the Republic, 2 consuls, elected by the people serving 1-year terms, a system built on accountability, on shared power, on the idea that no man should wield unchecked authority. It was an act of loyalty, not to a ruler, but to a vision of justice, of order, of civic responsibility. And yet history remembers him not as a hero, but as a paradox. Because Brutus also executed his own sons when they conspired to restore the monarchy, he did not flinch, he did not waver, he upheld the law, even when it demanded the death of his own blood. Was he cruel, or was he faithful to something greater than personal attachment? This is the question that haunts the loyal man. How far must he go? How much must he sacrifice? What must he endure when the world tells him that fidelity is foolish? We live in an age where loyalty is disposable, where relationships dissolve faster than they begin, where institutions crumble under the weight of short-term thinking, where men are told that detachment is strength, that independence is isolation, that meaning is whatever they choose it to be. But the loyal man knows better. He has trained his mind to resist impulse. He has conditioned his body to endure hardship. He has disciplined his heart to love without possession. And he has learned through trial, through pain, through loss, that the only thing worth possessing is the self. To be loyal is to be sovereign over one's own soul. To be disloyal is to be ruled by every passing desire. This is why the loyal man stands apart, not because he is superior, but because he is rare, and rarity invites scrutiny. He is called rigid in a world that prizes fluidity. He is called outdated in a world that worships novelty. He is called foolish in a world that mistakes short-term gain for wisdom. But none of these labels shake him, because he knows that true strength is not in adapting to every wind, but in standing firm when the storm rages. And here again, women appear, not as adversaries, not as temptations, but as reflections, because a woman reveals the state of a man's soul. She is not merely a romantic interest, she is the embodiment of what he truly believes in. She is the mirror that shows whether he serves something higher, or whether he is chasing illusions. For the loyal man, a woman is not someone to possess, she is someone to honor, not someone to control, but someone to protect, not someone to use, but someone to respect. And in a culture that reduces human connection to transaction, that mistakes passion for purpose, that elevates drama over dignity, he finds himself increasingly at odds with the very forces that shape modern relationships. He does not fear intimacy, he fears superficiality. He does not reject love, he rejects manipulation. He does not avoid women, he avoids those who demand conformity to false ideals, because he knows that loyalty is not just about staying, it is about discernment, about knowing what and who is worth remaining faithful to. And this is where most men fail. They confuse loyalty with blind allegiance. They mistake commitment for captivity. They equate devotion with weakness. But the loyal man sees the truth. Loyalty is not submission, it is sovereignty. It is the act of choosing something and refusing to let go, even when the world tells you to, even when others abandon their posts, even when the cause seems lost, even when history forgets your name. Because the loyal man does not serve for recognition, he serves because he must, because to do otherwise would be to betray the very core of his being. And in the end, that is what makes him unbreakable, not because he never falters, but because he always returns. If this shattered your illusions, like, comment, subscribe, and join the resistance to the modern drift, because the loyal man does not vanish, he simply waits for those ready to stand beside him.